All right, so I'm going to take some time to look through some of these harder problems. I'm going to start with number 12. We're going to go 12, 14, and 16, hopefully in the span of about 10 minutes. So I've got my handy-dandy scratch paper right here. I'm going to bring it up. All right. So 6 grapefruit. Why does anyone want 6 grapefruit? Grapefruit tastes nasty.
Yeah, they must be like messed up in the mind.
Crazy. All right. Oh well. Maybe you like it, so never mind. Grapefruit's wonderful. 6 grapefruit costs as much as a dozen oranges. So that means 6 grapefruit are going to equal a dozen oranges. So that's 12. The cost of a dozen grapefruit, so that is 12 grapefruit, and that's plus 2 dozen oranges, is $12. How much does a grapefruit cost? Well, I want to know how much a grapefruit costs. I don't particularly care how much an orange costs, right? So it would make more sense to isolate the O, figure out what 1 orange is worth in terms of grapefruit, because then I can use substitution and just find out how much 1 grapefruit is, because I don't care about the oranges. So I want to get this O by itself. So divide by 12, and I get 1/2 of a grapefruit is equal to an orange. Why you'd buy half a grapefruit is beyond me, but that's okay. We know we can get half a grapefruit for 1 orange, which means I can get 12 grapefruits plus 24 oranges, but an orange is worth half a grapefruit. And that's $12. Okay, so 24 times 1/2 is 12. So that's 12g plus 12g is equal to 12. So I get 24 grapefruits for $12. That means a grapefruit has to equal 50 cents or half a dollar, right? And so that one really wasn't too bad, was it? So there we go. We use substitution because it just made more intrinsic sense. Great. Hopefully we can get one that is a little more, the mad scientist, the chemist. A chemist has, I know, crazy, right? Crazy. All right. A chemist has 800 grams of a dye solution. That is 20% of its original strength. Well, so if the solution is 20% of its original strength, what part of the solution is dye? Well, if I have 800 grams, and I'm not going to write the units, and it's 20% dye, that means 160 grams are dye. So that's grams of dye. All right, so that means how much water, because you mix water and dye together, right? So then we have 800 minus my 160 grams of dye, and so that solution is 64 grams of H2O and 640 grams of H2O and 160 grams of dye. Okay, so I understand that first sentence. Let's go on to the second sentence. How much dye must be added to increase the strength to 50%? That's a great question. And hopefully well, no, because right now we have 160 grams of dye. So we have 160 grams of dye, and I want to add more dye, right? But if I add dye to the mix, that means not only will the amount of dye increase, but the amount of the whole solution will increase too. So that means if I add the X to the dye, I also must add the X to the total solution, because I'm adding it to the whole total solution, right? You can't pull the dye out of the mixture once you mix it with water. That's impossible. And we want it to be equal to 50%. equal to 50%. Well, geez, I don't know what to do with this. Although, 50%, there's got to be another way to write 50%.
Yeah.
Can you think of another way of writing 50%?
No.
No? Yeah. I could write it as 0.5, but you know what? I don't love 0.5 because I already have a fraction, so it would be really nice to turn it into a proportion. What is 50% as a fraction? 1/2. 2/4, yes. Thank you, wise. Very wise. 2/4. You say 2/4 and I write 2/4. Ha ha ha.
Well, it's true.
I'm going to write 1/2 because it's easier. Now we have a proportion, and we learned that in 7th grade we can cross multiply. We can multiply across the equal sign, and so that means that 600 plus x times 2 is going to equal 1 times 800 plus x. All right, now this is something I can work with. Unfortunately, I did not give myself enough room to work with it, so I'm going to, I don't want to erase. What I could do, right, is I can move it over here. All right, so I have room to work. All right, so 1 times 800 plus x is just 800 plus x. And that is going to be 320 plus 2x is equal to there. So let's get the x's together. It's just minus x. So I get x is equal to, I got 320 over here. We got the 800 over here. And that's a positive. So minus 320 minus 320. So I get x is equal to 480. So that means I have to add 480 grams of pure dye to my solution to take it from 20% dye to 50% dye. There we go. That's a lot of dye. So unfortunately, we've run out of time. So I hope you enjoyed this.